Okay, hello, good evening, and thank you so much for being here with us today. I know it's the finals week and everybody's super busy and super exhausted, so we really appreciate your presence, but I think it's worth it, the occasion. So we have here Irene Pérez and Jaume Mayol from TEDA Architects. By looking at their work, one quickly realizes there is a strong emphasis on craftsmanship. Irene and Jaume look at the territory, the landscape, its color, embracing the local culture, history, and tradition. They look at the past to project the future, translating, updating, and reinterpreting what has always been there, and without mimicking their work, put it into value throughout a creative process that updates the code as significance of architecture and site. In their work, craftsmanship has a unique value of connecting the mind and the object produced, emphasizing the perfect imperfection of handmade things. The name of their practice itself, Taller Estudio de Arquitectura, combines the essence of the two souls of their work. On the one hand, the workshop or atelier, the space for creation with hands-on, in a collective experimentation process, and the studio, that stimulating environment where to research, study, and focus. Their projects start with a deep understanding of the specificities of each place, including local traditions and use of what is already there as a tool. They work with things they have seen before and learn from the past to draw the near future. They have implemented many domestic projects, which means they have devoted themselves to listening and translating personal dreams and wishes into great pieces of architecture. This work requires attention, attentive care, and a great ability to listening. They include people as essential ingredients of their projects, and their residential projects acquire such a human feel that it makes them homes rather than houses. They identify their projects with the personal names of the clients as an expression of the complete connection between physical spaces and the people who inhabited them. They listen, they observe, and then they design, translating the personal essence of the owners and the history of the place into architecture. Simple and raw materials and local knowledge are the ingredients that, combined and connected, create their architecture. Their space is sensorial, exposing the observant to a range of textures, light, contrast, and irregularities that stimulate users for a personal interpretation of the residential spaces. A handcrafted ambience reminding us that architecture is the stage for life. They understand that architecture is lived from within, humanizing it from the inside but introducing a space as the main theme to favor corners, ambiguous spaces, and spatial irregularities, understanding that architecture is no more than a support for life. TEDA Architects is tiny award-winning practice based in Mallorca, Spain. Irene Pérez has an architecture degree from the Vallès School of Architecture. Jaume Mayol has an architecture degree from the Vallès School of Architecture and a PhD from the Catalonia Polytechnic University. They both also studied at the Roma 3 School and have two children, Aina and Biel. TEDA Architects have been jury members and visiting lectures at several international universities, including Cornell University in Ithaca, Accademia de Arquitectura di Mendrisio in Switzerland, Kingston School of Art in London, the ETSA Madrid, Lund Universitetet in Sweden, KTH Stockholm in Sweden, Architecture School, University College Dublin in Ireland, Facultad für Architektur in Munich, and many others. Irene and Jaume were directors of one of the workshops at the Porto Academy in 2017 in Portugal. They're currently teacher at the Facultad für Architektur in Graz, Austria. The work of TEDA Architects was exhibited in the Spanish Pavilion at the 2016 Venice Architecture Biennale, the Catalan Balearic Pavilion at the 2012 Venice Architecture Biennale, and the itinerant exhibition Sensitive Matter Young Catalan Architects 2010-2012, among others. Their work is bright, lightful, and overall optimistic, enabling us all to look at the future with great optimism and joy. Please join me to welcome Irene and Jaume, in which I hope to be an extraordinary lecture. Thank you so much.
Hello to everyone. First of all, thanks, Belinda, for your wonderful presentation. Everything is set, then I'm just going to add some images, no? But first of all, I want to thank you also, Mr. Mark Lee, for his kind invitation to lecture here. For us, it's a great pleasure. And we also want to thank you all here because we know that you are like in the final week working and you are very busy, then hope not to disturb your projects and your work. Okay. Then we are Irene and Jaume. We are these Terra Arquitectes, a tiny practice based in Mallorca, in the Mediterranean Sea. And we would like to introduce our work with this title, saying more is more, meaning complexity, no? And some contradictions, of course. No? We could say, as Belinda introduced, that we are quite linked to the territory, that this is our territory. No? This is the shape of the Mediterranean Sea, and we think that we share in the cultural background with the rest of the different countries, islands that are there around. No? We would like to present our work. We are going to talk about 4 projects, plus 3, but 4 main projects. And we are going to introduce in one concept related to each project. No? Then the first concept is typology, and will be related to Jaime and Isabel's home. In fact, it's the last project we have been finishing. Then we are starting for the end. No? And the concept of typology is really related to tradition, no? Or how knowledge is transmitted across time. No? What does tradition mean? Tradition comes from the Latin word tradere, that means to bring things forward. Doesn't mean to copy from the past, but to bring the knowledge, this strong knowledge that the tradition has, to the present. Then we are trying to work in this way. And how does tradition work? Tradition works by repetition, repeating and repeating. Repeating in Latin, it's idem. Then repetition creates identity of the places where you work. No?
Okay. We could agree on that the traditional typology that gives identity to the Mediterranean area is the patio house. Here, the impluvium, that is an efficient typology and a climatic machine and a device for storing water. And it's a typology converted into tradition for its efficiency, and we can say that it's a room with a roof, no? It's the impluvium, and this room that becomes a representative space in Lombardia with its business family palaces, but without losing its effectiveness, no? It's the Mediterranean area, and it's the same typology that we can find in our island, in Mallorca, and the Mallorcan merchants bring the typologies they have known in their travels, no? And they copying and repeating and transforming it. This is a cluster or cloister, we can say, and it's the translation of the patio to the country house, and it appears from the need to appropriate outer space and from the need to protect it against the weather conditions and again to collect water. here the regionalist architects reproduced and reinterpreted the traditional patio typology. Here, John Newton with a house in Mallorca, or Zanuso, regional architects from Mallorca too, Siza or Alto, and this is a patio understood as an oasis, or the patio understood as a collective space. But with this image, we want to say that we want to copy the traditional architecture in an epidermical way, and we try to be part of the tradition, and we try to bring its knowledge further. And
this is the first project we are going to explain. Is Jaime and Isabel's home. This is a project in urbanization. No? Then we had this plot is 9,000 square meters. No? And this is the first photo we took from the plot. No? It's quite a nice plot, in fact. It's a very soft slope to the south, facing the sea. Oh, sorry. Back. Okay. Facing the sea, no? And looking south, no? And it's the best situation you can have. Then when you are walking through the street, you had this very nice view of the landscape, no? Then the first idea was to bury the house, understanding that it can be part of the landscape and it can keep the view of the pedestrians over the house, no? When we walk over the plot, we discover kind of rocks like emerging from the terrain, no? And also different plants, flowers that were like wild vegetation, local vegetation, without any maintenance, no need to water. And it was all around the plot the same stuff, no? Like rocks emerging, these huge stones, no? And also this vegetation that was kind of a garden itself, no? Then the final section was to bring this vegetation over the roof, understanding that you can keep this image of the landscape, and what it's needed to see is the sea or these open views, no? And introducing what Irene was explaining, no? The typology. Then we introduce a patio inside of this house, no? When we start to work, we start from the basic shape of a patio, then the square, and the square inside a square. But in this sense of bringing things forward, in this sense of transforming the existing, transforming the things we have seen before, we start to transform this regular patio into an irregular one by pushing the inner facades of this cloister, of this patio. In a first step, without any strategy, but in a second moment, we decide to just push the center of these facades, discovering in this case that we had one patio built of 5 different spaces. Finally, we decide to cover the center of this patio. Then we could say that we have 4 patios, and by now we can say a porch in the middle. We will see how it finishes, no? Then it was kind of a transformation of the main idea of a patio. And this was one of these first sketches that was related to these clusters, the cloisters that I didn't explain you, that it's an empty space, but surrounded by units, rooms, or units of structure. Then structure and room, it's coincident, and place it all around this empty space as a necklace, no? Organizing this empty space in the middle. some of the rooms were like looking inside or being inside of this space, no? And creating these 5 spaces, no? Sorry, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and in the center, the third one, the fifth one. And this was a small model with it, just to understand that there could exist a topography over the house, no? An artificial topography in a sense. No? Then structure and rooms were coincident. This is the definition of the rooms through the bearing walls that define the structure and the distribution, let's say. All around the perimeter of the house, in order to have quite dense facade, and a deep facade, strong facade, we place all the services. That means, well, it's okay, this image also. Then kitchen, bathrooms, terraces, bathrooms, all the closets, like technical rooms, etc., all in the perimeter. No? Then here on top you have the street always. No? Then half the house it's kind of buried, no? And the rest is looking to the views. No? And in the center you have all these spaces, all these outdoor spaces, all these outdoor rooms. No? Half of the house from here to here, it's 90 centimeters over this part here, in order not to do more excavation than the one it's completely needed. No? Then these are the sleeping rooms. No? Then here you have kitchen, dining, and living room. The house just has one level, well, 2 levels, but one plan, let's say. No? But when you start to draw the plan in different levels, the plan changes. No? We can say that this is drawing the same house and the same level, but drawn in different highness. No? Well, this is the drawing that we love to bring to universities, no? Because it's those plans that you can perceive kind of different projects behind all these lines. No? There is a kind of a fight with the lines, and how many projects have died under these lines, no? Just to keep the final one. Perhaps it's not the best one. Perhaps it's just the one that is more in balance. No. Right. Okay, we move forward. Then, with this simple scheme of bringing some rooms inside of the cloister, inside of the patio, you discover that the sections start to become quite interesting, quite complex in a sense. No? Then on the right hand we have the street, like up here, no? And here we have the views, no? And this is the west side of the house. Then you have the upper level, the bottom, no? Then you have all the section is interior, no? When you cut against like 2 meters in parallel, you have interior, exterior, interior, exterior, interior, but in 2 different levels. No? If you move, you find interior. This is all exterior in different levels, and interior again. When you are in the middle, you start to have like interior, exterior, but kind of covered exterior. Let's see how, and not interior. Then you start to bring this simple complexity, we could say, into the project. No? And we look into the street, it's the same thing. It happens the same thing. You find kind of these different levels and different situations in the house. No? If we pay attention, we start to discover like there are a lot of elements characterizing this interior. No? Then you discover lintel, you discover bricks, you discover chimneys, you discover building elements, constructive elements that are part of this interior. No? But what happened with this central space that I call it porch? We start doing this model. No? These are only the facades of the patio, the central facades of the patio, to understand this element on top. No? At the very beginning, we were doing these models where we were understanding this roof as the fifth facade, no? This concept that is really architectonical, but sometimes stupid also. And this was one of these moments that is a stupid one, no? Because what we would like to is to have this interior of the patio with light and sun during winter, but not during summer. But with these holes, you don't solve the stuff, no? And what we did is what we always do, is to look back and to copy and to bring these things forward, no? At home, we have this vine tree in front of the house that has a very nice constructive detail. Then you have shadow only in summer, but not in winter, because the leaves fall. Then it's a very simple element to copy and to bring to the project. With a very simple structure, you could have this shadow just in summer, but not in winter. Or if you don't want to plant, you could do also these canes or these fixed shadows that you can remove during winter. No? Then, while doing this research, this traditional research on these vine tree spaces, no, you discover things like this that I cannot say if here there is no architecture or here there is all the architecture I can imagine, no? Because it's quite an incredible space. I would like to have lunch here. I don't know, play football. Well, I don't play football, but perhaps, I don't know. But it's a very incredible space to be, no? Fresh, you could imagine, no? Let me stop just for a moment. We bring this image from Sigurd Leverens, no? But with a sentence from Louis Kahn. Louis Kahn wrote that even a brick wants to be something. And Leverens was the one who was drawing and building and placing in the work brick by brick. Then every brick wants to be something. You probably all know this plan. It's George Newton's house in Mallorca. I don't want to explain the house at all. I just want you to fix your eyes on one element. In this very last room, that's 2 meters 40. This is a bed. It's 2 meters 40 because it's 3 stones of mares of 80 centimeters. But right in the middle, there is a column. There is a column standing in the middle of this room. Why John Newton placed a column right in the middle, right in front of the door when you enter in the room? Is because, as Louis Kahn said with the bricks, this column wants to be something. Then when we think our projects, we start to study layer by layer, we could say, and start to understand what every element wants to be. In this case, the outer layer of the facade was built with the stones we had under our feet the first time we were visiting the plot, no? And while we were doing the excavation, we were producing the material, the waste material that will be part of the facade. If the outer layer of the facade is made of stones from the place, from the plot, the inner layer will be made of earth, then of clay, of bricks from the island too. The dimension of each wall depends on the dimension of a brick. Inside these walls, we are going to place some furniture that is not going to be movable, no, it's going to be fixed furniture all around. First of all in wood, but finally in concrete, as you're going to see. But we also can explain this project just talking about the pavements. In Mallorca, we have this hydraulic tile pavement, very traditional ones, no? That we decide to use in the project to underline, to express how, every room has its own identity. We could also talk about the horizontal structure of the ceilings, no? or about the spacing between the beams of these ceilings. And what happens in the center of this patio? The center of this patio was, we were imagining this central patio as an oasis, as a kind of a ruin, as an infinite space that this vine tree, this vegetation, will finish with the time, no? Then we imagine like all the directions of the structure collapsing in the center of this patio, no? And we would like just to build not a ceiling, but an unfinished ceiling, no? Something that once covered with vegetation will be finished. But what happens when you start to think on every element? What happens with electricity, for example? As you can see, we let some holes on the walls where to place a piece of wood instead of a brick, and over this piece of wood we could screw the plugs and the switches. But where? This could seem kind of a texture of the facade, etc. No? But if you pay close attention, what happens with these double layers of bricks? The plugs and the switches were higher than one brick. Then we need 2 bricks to take out to substitute for a piece of wood. Then all these layers that are coincident, double layers, no, are the 90 centimeters of the switches, the 30 centimeters, and the 220, where we have the upper switches for the lighting. But per 2. Because we have in the house 2 layers, two levels, no? Then the 19, the 190, and there is a kind of a system to understand where to place the plugs, because the plugs even want to be something. This is a partial, not very big model that we did in order to understand and to make the client understand all these elements, no? All the bones and etc. No? But let me just pay attention to one of these elements, no? Is this column. As I have said before, it's a bearing wall structure. But even the columns want to be something, then we have to place somewhere a column. However, if you ask to your structural engineer where to place this column, he will ask to place it right here, no? But the column doesn't want to be a beam, then it has to be out of it. Then the column is independent. And this kind of mistake that we have on the floor, it's not a mistake, because as you can understand, there is no column that starts over the tiles. Then the column is trying to look for the foundations of the building, no? Then in this very first moment, there was a hole all around the column to understand that the column is not starting here. And even the foundation wants to be something. These are the different rooms. This is a kitchen, etc. I'm not going to talk in detail. And this is a house kind of 2 years ago when we were finishing, not finished at all. And it seems that the process of this hair, it's the opposite as mine. It's turning like wild and wild, no? And without trying to disappear, it's part of the landscape, but it's there. We cannot erase it, no? And as you can see, the walls made of the stones, no? Then all this garden, but it's not, this garden, but made of like local plants, etc. No? This is it. You start to discover the patio in the center, no? And you can perceive the views over the house. No? Then when you turn, you discover that there is no door. There is just one door. Then it should be the entrance. This is the south facade. And once you get in, you start to discover all these elements, no? This is the house without furniture. With furniture is funnier, but in this case we can perceive that even the house is kind of with furniture because all the constructive elements are part of this interior, no? And this is how the column finished it, because of course the client didn't want to have a hole until the foundation, but it's a kind of a crazy trick, this one of the mirror, no, that seems that the column goes down, no, and we were kind of happy it's in between the model and the possibilities that the client want, no. You can perceive the switches or these woods, all this fixed furniture made of concrete, and you start to discover the patio in the center of it, no. But this, from this very simple scheme that we have seen at the very beginning, no, it starts to become quite a bit complex, no. This is the dining room where now there are like lamps hanging on the table, no? And from the dining you see the kitchen. This is it. Then every element. And I'm not going to stop in every element, but as you can imagine, the facade, the facade has two layers, no, of bricks, the inner one and the exterior one. And each layer has its own lintel. As you can imagine, each lintel is different, no, it's not the same. Then we turn to the rooms area, no? The dressing room, for example, parents' room. This detail of the picture just in the corner. Children's rooms and the relation in between them, no? There's a window where they connect until they will become teenagers. They will close, I'm sure. This one. And then you get inside of this oasis, no? Where you discover this, it's one room but made of different spaces, no? And connected in this diagonal, no? And as you can see now, these photos are quite old. There is not yet the vine tree. You are going to see in some place, I don't know. But now it's growing and growing, no? You start to see here how it was dry or growing. Then this inner room, this interior room, this central room, it's an outdoor room. Because there we have a climate that it's possible to have lunch outside 8 months a year, at least. And this is this kind of oasis, no? This is a space that you discover that you cannot imagine when you are in the street, no? Part of this tradition that we were explaining. We don't have too much time to get in detail, but if we had a bit more time, we could explain this project related to a patio house also. This one could be related to our habits, the habits we can have in the Mediterranean Sea. We love to bring this drawing by Bertrand Rudowski, you know? He draws a room without roof, but a room with furniture, a bed, a lamp, a piano, some chairs, but with grass and with a pine tree. But it's written interiors. Then this is the space that we are trying to build with this house. It's a resident with a cross house in it. Then these are 4 patios. Normally the patio is in the center of the house. In this case, it's not. Then each room had a double room, and you have living room. You can stay in or you can stay out. You can sleep in or you can do the siesta under the tree in this hammock. No, you can cook in or cook out, etc. No? and these double spaces. Then when you are out, and when you start to get in, you don't know exactly where you are, because in this case you are in, but you are out. You don't have ceiling, you don't have pavement. These spaces in between. And when you are completely in, you discover that you have another interior, but perhaps it's an exterior, but it's part of it, no? Then we move to the second concept. It can be material, no? We understand material as resources, then what we have and what we can do with the things we have, no?
Okay, we can look here an image that is showing us that that the needs of the past have changed, no? Where we used to keep a horse cart here, now we need to keep a car, no? This case. The popular knowledge tells us that it is not necessary to start from the scratch. We can transform and we can reuse. Not recycling, just reusing, no? We can reuse and transform an old door that open to the interior of the storage, and in a new door that allows us to solve new situations. I'm sorry. And again, the traditional knowledge does not throw anything. With the spokes of a bicycle wheel, we repair a water container and give it a new life. No waste, no. And here it's that Jaume said, what we have and what we need, no? We have a step slope and a field full of stones, and we need to cultivate. And to cultivate, we need a flat land without stones. Then, with these stones, with the waste, we build walls that provide us with flat, with flat terraces, with these walls of stones, and we do not throw. We recolocate with a benefit in this case. And this is the walls, and once again, no, they need a place to for the ship out of the sea, and what we do, they carefully take out the rock of the sea, and even forming steps with the same job, and then they build the storage for the boat with these stones. And here we have a part of a building by Josep Maria Jujol, a modernist architect from Catalonia that worked in this sense, and he was a master reusing materials.
In this case, it's a house in a village. In fact, in the village where we are living, it's a house that normally in this village, well, in the villages in Mallorca, you have houses in between party walls. Then they just have two facades. But in this case, it was special because it's a house in a corner, no? Sorry, it's a house in a corner. Then there was not just one direction from the street to the patio, but we could take benefit of this third facade just to generate a multi-directional scheme with views and organization of the house. And in this sense, the svastic cross came, no, in order to have this multiple directional house, no. Then the structure that once again is built of bearing walls builds also the distribution, and distribution answers to this question of the situation of the urban landscape in this case. No? Then in these walls we made holes, but not only towards the street or the patio, but also between the interiors, the different interiors. Then you create like transparencies and relations in between the different walls, the different rooms. No? How you obtain this? It's easier if you place all the services in the perimeter of the house. Then you allow to have this completely free relation in between the four rooms. No? And this is the basement, but if we go to the main floor, to the ground floor, we have these 4 rooms, then dining, kitchen, living, and studio that are connected with all the services in the perimeter, then chimney, stairs, studio, storage, stairs, terraces, bathrooms, etc. And in the middle is completely free. No? And there are some steps in between these different levels. The upper level, the upper floor, is for the sleeping room. There are 3 sleeping rooms with some holes connecting also in vertical different levels of the house. Then when from this, once again, this very simple scheme, when you do the sections, then you discover kind of spaces that are connected and a kind of a richness of the space itself. No, there is pretty nothing to see, but you can see like these services in the perimeter and there's vastic cross with these walls. No, but okay, we were talking about material. No, but we have been introducing these walls. No, and how we are going to build these walls? Well, in the plot, there was a pre-existing building made of marés. Marés is this sandstone, the one you have seen in the Jornuzon house, for example. No, is the local sandstone that is commonly used all around. No, is this one? Is a stone that normally it's 20 centimeters deep per 80 large per 40 high. No. Then what you see here is 80-40. And as you can see, there are some different small holes. We are going to talk about this later on. Instead of demolishing this building and throwing away all the material, we decided because of my father, because one day we went there. Well, this is a house for my brother, okay? And my father, with the thought of an old man, let's say, it's not old at all, but with this old thought, said, okay, what are you going to do with all these stones? And it was like an answer that was a question that was smashing us. No? It was really strong because we went at home like, okay, we cannot throw this. There is a lot of material, a lot of effort, tons of stone, that what are we going to do with this? No? Then, of course, we decide and we need to reuse it. Not to recycle it with industrial processes, but to reuse it, directly reuse, as the tradition always does. No? Then, instead of throwing this away, we decide to collect all the stones, all the blocks, no? To pile them and to store them for its reuse. As you have seen, the stone is 20, 40, 80, but normally in the ancient times, not nowadays, they use a very poor mortar. And in order to allow the mortar to get under the stone, when they had one over the other, they use these scarves. It's called a bouredor, like somewhere to put a liquid mortar, no, and to allow to get under the stone. And they just push a bit off the stone with some small pieces of wood. Then when they take out, they had this the small holes you have seen in the very first image, no? These are the scarves later on. Then what we decide, and now you cannot use this with these scarves because the actual mortars cannot be used in different highness. No, they need to have kind of a continuous highness. No, then what we decide is to cut precisely these stones in two, having these flat surfaces, no, and turn them, and now the hidden side of them will be the facade. No? And once we were there, okay, normally the original stones were 80, but finally after demolishing the building, transforming, cutting, transporting, etc., they had some cracks. We had a lot of different sizes, no? And once we were on site, the builder, he at the beginning he didn't agree that much to place the stone in that sense because it wasn't normal. We promised them to plaster everything. It wasn't not nice. However, we crossed fingers. And once we were there, he asked us, because there were two, and one was starting from here and the other one from the other side. And he asked us, okay, and when we are going to get together, perhaps we will have a gap of 5 centimeters, 3 centimeters, 9 centimeters. What are we going to do? Okay, I said, okay, just remove the stone and put another one. No, we have a lot of. I will not remove the stone. It's very heavy, you know. Do you want to hold one for some minutes? No, thank you. It's okay. But okay, let's think for a solution, no? Then, as you can see, if this was 40, now it's 20 per 20. Okay. Pretty nothing. I don't know. Well, okay. In Mallorca, we have a very simple. There is less than €1, no? Then very simple tile made of clay. Then if this is local stone, this is local clay, then it's 20 per 20. This is the typical size, no? The very normal size. Then we decide to infill these gaps with kind of a library of tiles, no? Then if you have just a gap of 30 centimeters, you just place one tile with its joints. And if you have 5, you place 2. And in order to solve this problem that the builder had. The question is that at the very end he tried to invent some gaps to put more tiles because he found it kind of a nice solution, no? But it's okay. He was calling me, okay, can I place something here with a photo by WhatsApp? Okay, yes, please. Okay, then we did some elevation. We did the facade, but this. We were reusing these marais, this sandstone, for the blind parts of the facade. No, this is it with the small tiles. No, and the upper part when we finish it, and all the frames, all the lattices were built with new sandstone. The new sandstone that we went to buy in the same quarry. It's quite different, the color, because it changed a bit, but because it was my father who bought it, we knew perfectly where it was from. Then we decided to go there to buy new stones, but kind of old, familiar of the old ones, no? Then that's the finishing of it, no? How it finished. However, sometimes when you see work that is made of bricks or stones or whatever, it cannot be built just with bricks or with stone. You need something else. In this case, this is sculpture, this arch. It seems that it's built with these mortar blocks, no? But it's not. It's not only. in between each block, you can see here small pieces of stone that adjust it and make it possible to make the arch. That's it, no? This arch is not possible without this small wooden piece, no? This is usual again. In our case, this work is not possible without the small tile. We discovered the tile with this problem that I explained you before, but afterwards we decided to reuse it for many different constructive problems, no? In this case, here you have the facade, then tones of stone going down with a lintel made of stone, and here the deepness of the windows is 1.50 meters. Then from here to the wall I have in our back, no, we decide to also to cover this with stones. Then this is a very small vault. It's just 5 centimeters in the middle, no, to cover this space. But this is a mares of 10 centimeters high. Then it's not heavy. But here it's very heavy. Then if we join both, a crack will appear. What we do is to make the crack with tiles. Also to avoid like the water going down and getting in, because here it breaks, no? I don't know the name in English. Here it breaks and the water falls, no? What else? When we have these terraces, these windows, we need to have a handrail, no? And this handrail will be made of iron. The cheapest ones, the ones we use to reinforce the concrete, no? And this iron will be inside of the stone wall, but we don't want to hurt the stone. Then we are going to place 3 small tiles. This reddish color is because the terrain, the soil, has oxide of iron in it. Then when the handrail will oxidate in the future, we'll drop some oxide of iron over the oxide of iron of the tile. Then I think it will be okay. Then here we see the small vault with the lintel and the tiles, etc. Well, then a work cannot be done with just one material. It needs something else to solve it. No? This is how the house finished. You have seen the new stone and the old stones, etc. And in the interior, you perfectly see the bearing walls and with the holes connecting the different rooms and different levels. No? But we don't have too much time. If we have more time, we could talk a bit more in detail, like getting to the millimeter, perhaps, no? This is a house in a small apartment in Barcelona, no? And we could talk about these millimeters of this aggregate in this joint, no? This is a joint of 1 centimeter. And we could talk about these seats between 1 and 6 millimeters of this aggregate. Where this aggregate comes from? There was a pre-existing pavement made of clay tiles, kind of a patchwork, no? Very different pavements, but mainly made of this. And the apartment is for a guy who owns. It's a tile producer. It produces hydraulic tiles. No, then in one hand these tiles, and on the other hand he would like to have like floor heating. Then we decide to remove the pre-existing clay tiles and to transform with this other pattern made of the new hydraulic tiles. However, we reused the pre-existing tiles, we smashed them, and we reused the smashed pre-existing tiles as an aggregate for the joint in between the new tiles. Then these red ants that you see walking online, it's the old pavement that was there. No? And we could get a bit more in detail, but we have to move on. The third concept, no? It's a palimpsest. we now are never going to be the first working in a place, no?
Here we have a map of Troy that show us different times on the same space, no? These layers of interventions overlapping ones with the others. All lines sharing space with the new ones, no? This old. The important it's not demolishing and not erasing the past and not starting from scratch, but adapting to it, to taking advantage of it. The old palace walls were reused for the new houses, and some rooms were transformed into squares. No, sorry. Right. Lots of buildings have been built as a palimpsest, overlapping and reusing, revolving it. No, this is the Cordoba Mosque that we appreciate, the old church. But not only buildings, but also cities. An old Roman circus became a square, and its radial walls became party walls in between the different houses. And the important, it's not erasing and not forgetting and not hiding, but taking advantage of the past, reusing it and revolving it.
In this case is again an apartment in the old city center of Palma, the main city of Mallorca. When we get in, this was what existed at that time. The apartment is located in a corner. This is a street and a street. Then here is neighbor, entrance or stairs, and neighbor, and a street and a street. No? And what we only had there in this plan is like a perimeter, facade or party wall, and some spots of a structure. We decided to place 3 closed rooms. It was 2 sleeping rooms with a bathroom and a kitchen, in order to have like these diagonal free spaces in between the closed spaces. Then these are the 2 rooms with 1 bathroom and the kitchen. And here we have the entrance as a playground, the dining room and the living room. This is more or less the result with the model. And this was one of the first drawings, or perhaps the first one we show to the client. No? In this case, we didn't know it at that time, but it's the beginning of building a palimpsest. No? Then there was a support with an existing perimeter. There was an independent layer of made of concrete. This is made of marés. Then we needed. It was just a 1-layer facade. We decided to isolate all the perimeter and to build an inner layer with, in this case, with bricks. We didn't know what kind of bricks. And then the closet rooms will be made on wood. Then kind of different material, different shapes, overlapping in the same place. But this was just the very first drawing. This became much more complex, rich, and funny when we start to build. No? There was the pre-existence, no? Like this, just one space. No? This was the image, the first image we took when we get there. An old owner decided to sell the apartment just when he started to demolish everything, no? Because of the crisis. No? This was 2011. Then there was another independent layer overlapping. Is this concrete structure? No? And in between this concrete structure, there was a kind of a very special clay structure. These are beams made of pieces of clay, U-shaped, with an iron inside of it, and some concrete with steel in it. And we thought it was a special thing that we need to keep or to see, no? To revalue. Then, in between, I don't know if you saw it, but when we enter in the apartment, there was already a pavement made of concrete, no? That was poured by this old owner, no? And over the pre-existing tiles, no? Then once she demolished all the partitions, all the walls, a gap in between the different rooms appeared. And there was a hurt part of these past moments, no? Another layer that we decided to keep. The easiest thing to solve this gap, or the first thing you think is, okay, we have concrete all around, then we will infill it with concrete. But as you know it, when the concrete dries, it becomes smaller, and a crack will appear, for sure. And the concrete will not be the same color. Then you will perceive it, you will see it, I'm sure. Then instead of infilling with concrete, we decide to put these old partition walls into a higher level. And instead of using concrete, we used pieces of marble to infill this. The marble will not become smaller, then the gap will not appear. Then perhaps the constructive problem is solved, no? This was the aspect of the gap once we clean it, no? Sometimes the two rooms weren't at the same level, then we have to put it at the same level. We used the gap to run some cables and electricity cables. And then, well, a nice work came, very kind craftsman making all this puzzle, all these different pieces, no? And we decided to understand this joint, this gap, as a continuous element, no? Then, when the gap changes its direction, no cut will appear. The cuts are in between when it's kind of straight, in order to have this continuity, no? Some nice pieces appeared, like this T-shaped one. Very fragile, but with the first one it worked, and lucky us. Then, once it was finished, we decided to polish everything at the same level. Then that's the layer of these pre-existing walls, no? Sometimes we're covering an old closet. Then the next layer was this perimeter wall that was hiding the isolation, no? The isolation was done with natural cork that the client had from an old work he did, and he had some pieces, and we decided to reuse it also. And to understand, to know what kind of material we could use for this interior layer, we went to how you call them, a fabric, factory of bricks, a brick factory, just to understand what they were producing, And it was kind of a stupid question, an architect asking there what they were producing, but I was looking for something cheap because it's a very low budget work. And he said, no, we produce bricks, we produce tiles. Let me have a walk all around your, yeah, sure, you can get in. And while we were walking through, in a corner we discovered a huge amount of bricks full of powder and well, old stuff, And I decided to ask, what is this? He said, okay, I will never sell this. But what is this? Okay, in Spain we have a system called termoarcilla. I don't know here if you have something like this, and there are pieces of 29 centimeters, or 19 or 24 or 29, large, but you cannot cut them. They have air cells in it. Then the system works if you don't cut them. However, in Mallorca, everyone cuts everything, and doesn't matter how it works, But for not to cutting it, they produce termoarcilla. They produce pieces of adjustment of 10 and 5 centimeters. They'll sell you in a package of 2 of 10, and the central one is 5 centimeters. This guy, this brick factory, need to produce the proportion of pieces of adjustment just to have the stamp, the certificate of termoarcilla. But they didn't sell it. I say, okay, if you don't need it, I will take it. Okay, then the prices start to go up until a certain moment that I say, okay, we will not do it with this. Okay, then half price is for you. Then we took all this waste material again, something that it's okay, not needed for anyone. Then these are the pieces. This is 10, 5, and 10. But normally it's used in this sense. Normally it's used in this sense, not to break these cells, these air cells. But as I explained you, in this case, we had used as a thermal isolation these cork panels. Then we don't need this material as an isolation material. Then, as you are going to see later on, we reuse it. We use it on this. This is the facade that we are going to see in the interior of the apartment. Then we turn it. These pieces, as I have said you before, are 19 per 19. Well, in fact, 19.5 per 19.5. And this is our tile, the famous tile that I explained you before, that is 20 per 20, because, as you can imagine, over these teeth, this tooth, how can I place a socket? It's impossible. It's impossible to screw it. Then we are going to substitute one of these pieces for our famous tile in order to have the plugs on it. However, the highness of the interior of this apartment was 2 meters 70, then 270 centimeters, and this is 19 plus 1 of the joint is 20. Then we need 10 centimeters more. Then we decide to build this small plinth with a basic brick, in order not to have this tooth until the pavement, because it's very dirty. Then in this case it was much more clean. And how we place these bricks on the walls? Normally you place the bricks with cutting the vertical joint, but in this case it wasn't a structural joint, a structural wall. Then we decided to place in like vertical joints, just to show that this is not a structure. And we turn the termoarcilla, this thermal brick, in order to show that this is not working as a thermal stuff. No? Some other tiles help us to solve different points in order not to cut the termorcillas. And at the end of some walls, we also were using these tiles. However, it's when the electricity comes, no, that we take out some bricks and we substitute for our tile with a very precise, 3 precise holes, no? 2 for the screws and 1 for the cable, of course. And this is it, no? And this is with the plug. No? Then we add another layer of these palimpsests, these wooden boxes. Why they were made of wood? Because it wasn't a pre-existing structure. In order not to put more charge on the ceiling, we decided to build in a very light material. No? I'm not going to get in the joints of this wood because we don't have time enough. But we were like working in the carpenter atelier, like one-to-one, small mock-ups at the very beginning, and placing with the carpenter each element in its place. No? And also with the client, he's Vicente, the client, the owner, very special guy. He's Vicente again, not the carpenter, but he was always on site. No? And what happens when you have to hold the lights in this space that we want to see the ceiling? We cannot have like the cables in the ceiling. They are going to be over the ceiling. What we decide is to have a tube that will be hanging from the ceiling. Then from the plug, we are going to have a cable running inside of this tube. Then the bubble will drop, the light will drop from this tube, you know? And in contrast with the ceiling, that is kind of a rough texture, we place these brass tubes, no? In order to contrast with it. No? Then this is the plug. It goes until here, then it runs into the tube, and then it drops the bubble. There are some funny ones that they are laughing. This is how they hung. We will have the cable running in it. No? And that's the complete result of elements coinciding on this same space, layers of interventions, layers of elements. No? This is how it was before adding the woods that were placed like one by one in its place. No? And this is more or less how it is now, not finished yet after 8 years, but we are going to finish someday. It seems here that it's finished because we decided to take some photos and to clean it, but now it's a mess again. But no worries, we will do it. It's not finished because the owner doesn't know exactly how it wants to finish it, because I think we are going to let this first room like opened, just with the structure. It's a kind of a room, but it's opened. No? It's not need to close if you don't want to do certain things in it. No? Then here you can see like the diagonals in between these different rooms, no? And all the elements, no? Hanging around. And the more that are coming, but we don't have time enough. In any case, there are some funny things, no? Of course, we need to have fun during the site, no? But all this stuff, if we have time, we would like to get in another concept, is the craftsmanship, no? Or we could say the precision of the things that are done by hand, or the imprecision sometimes, no? These things that are not very well finished, no? In this case, we could explain this project that is also from the same client and using the same bricks, but in another position, just in a simpler way, like having this textile, no? Like defining all these interiors, no? Kind of every element here is done by hand, no? Every new element. But we don't have time. Then we have to move to the very last concept, that it's, once again, Vicente. Well, it's a very nice place. You can rent it. Yeah. Mollepetit.com. You know, it's true. You can rent it, but it's very nice. Okay, we are going to finish with a project we built in Switzerland. Then we are going to talk about the infraordinary things, no? These things that can allow us to have this timeless architecture, no? This is perhaps a kind of a Bible for us, George Perec, and I'm reading from the book. What speaks to us is always the big event, the untoward, the extraordinary. The front page, a splash, the banner headlines. Railway trains only began to exist when they are derailed, and the more passengers that are killed, the more the train exists. What's really going on? What we are experiencing, the rest, all the rest, where is it? How should we take account of? Question. Describe what happens every day and recurs every day. The banal, the quotidian, the obvious, the common, the ordinary, the background noise, the habitual.
Okay. We are interested in the normal things, the common, the prosaic, the ordinary, and the infraordinary, you know? And this is what tradition does, repetition after repetition, working with the local resources, and the traditional architecture becomes popular and normal. No? When we started to visiting Switzerland, we discovered its old traditional architectures. Its traditional wooden structures that we were amazed, and we were not for that country, of course, from sorry. For us, the normal was a surprise, no? And these old wooden buildings built with local resources, solving local needs and answering to the local climate adversities. And is this kind of things that we found. And while visiting the plot during the competition, we discovered these old farms. It's every time the same. A compact volume, completely built in wood, with a regular shape, and a double roof, and built on a stone basement. No? It's always the same, repeated once and again. No? And once we got in, we discovered an amazing interior with incredible double and triple spaces defined by an important wood structure. These interiors. And finally, most of them were covered with very delicate wooden shingles as a dress, no?
Then, when we had to do the competition, that's in a village in the country, in the countryside, no? And we are in the edge of this village, no? When we had to do the competition, it was kind of very clear what we had to do, no? It's what tradition has done before, like compact volume over a plinth made of stone or concrete, double pitch roof or pitch roof, everything built in wood. And when getting in, it was going to be a very important wooden structure with double or triple space, no? And everything will be covered with a very nice dress made of wooden shingle, no? That was kind of the formula, because the thought is quite different than the one we have in Mallorca. The resources are very different. That's a photo of a forest in Switzerland. This is not, of course, Mallorca, no? Then, in the competition, what we did, this is the model from the competition, the 1 to 500, no? We did a very compact volume, regular shape, pitched roof, etc., no? And I would like to bring these plans that are from the competition, but we draw the structure to submit the competition, even in two A1 panels, no? We decided to say that the structure was important, no? All these points, no? All these columns made of wood, and these double beams on the sides of the columns, no? This is for the same reason as always, no? The beams are beams, the columns are columns, and the columns don't want to be beams, no? Then this was a model that we did just for the structure. This was going to be the basement made of concrete. On it there will be a main structure made of columns and beams, double beams and simple columns made of wood, and then a secondary structure will appear to cover everything. Okay. And then the facade in the competition, we would like to bring this because there are some mistakes in the competition that you submit and then you solve it, of course, no? The facade was a kind of a dress covering all the structure, but we didn't want this situation to cover everything, no? Then we decided to do this trick, this double render, no? Then showing like the structure, but showing also the dress. Because if we just show the dress, we don't show the structure. Then, but at the end, we would like to show everything, and it was fine, no? I think we got it. And the interior was this aspect of a very old farm, no? Like with this triple space with this column in the middle that I'm going to explain afterward. And these are the final plans. This is the basement. Well, they are like technical rooms, storage, etc. No, and in the center there is a column. No. Then on the ground, on the ground floor there is kind of a porch, then different rooms and features. But in the center there is a column. When we go up, this spastic order, we have the services in these small rooms and the classrooms on the corners of the building. No? Then this is a double space here, that when we change, the level turns there. But as you have seen, that column that was on the basement is going up, up, up. And when it gets under the skylight here, it opens just to hold the roof. There is no other need of this column, no? Well, this is the structure of the organization of the building, no? And this is spastic shape. When you start to build, it's there, of course, no? But with this very simple strategy of just turning the double spaces just 90 degrees on each plan, you, once again, with this very simple scheme, you got kind of very surprising spaces inside of the building. No? And here you have a double space with a double space connected. No? If you move a bit, it's a triple space. No? If you move again, you have the double space in the porch. Again in the porch. Then it hints in the porch, here is in, then they are connected. No? Then from this very simple scheme, you start to have this complexity. No? Then we got to the facade. No? We were trying to solve this situation of the shingles and the structure. No? Then we need to make a structure only for the facade. No? This is the mock-up we built with different kinds of woods and different kinds of finishes for the Cooper shingles, the ones in the bottom. No? This is so nice. I don't know if you here in the States do this, but well, for building a school there in Switzerland, you have to pass over 3 referendums. No? And one of the referendums, the last one, is to draw on site your building, and hopefully there is no neighbor saying it's too big, it's too high, it's too left, it's too right, because you have to rethink the whole project. But it's funny to see how is it on site before building. No? Then we decide to build room by room with very strong detail, no? With very paying attention to every corner, to every millimeter, in order to build these models 1 to 15. We always work in this scale, no? But you can perceive different small joints here. It's 1 centimeter joint. Then in these models you can do it, no? And you can perceive perfectly the proportion of the things, no? These shingles, of course, in the bottom were because of the snow, because of the rain. We don't want to. The first wooden shingle couldn't be made of wood because it will root because of the snow and the rain. No? Then we decided to change. Here it was brass, but of course brass neither in Switzerland can be paid. Then we decided to move to the copper traditional ones. No? But we also did different models of different classrooms and main spaces with very precise detail. No? This is one of the last, the upper level. No? And there are some points that you can say, okay, this is not too precise. For example, there's a small gap here that ends there. No? But of course, it is for the air conditioning. No? And you have like one material in the changing room and one material in the classroom and one material in between, the wooden one. No? Then you can get into the detail with some precision. No? You have all the joint in between the boots. I think that the projection is not precise enough, but it's okay. Then with these models, I think they are very useful for the client, etc. Then I think we were very lucky when we went to take the photos because it's not full of snow during the whole year. Of course, neither during the whole winter. But that weekend was kind of an epic weekend. No? The village was isolated and it was really nice. Then it appears like an old structure in the landscape, an old wooden structure, like an old farm. No? It's like an old stuff, no? In contrast with the landscape. No? We were lucky because the landscape is very beautiful. Then you have all these shingles, no? This that seems kind of an ornament. And I will say that it can be also considered as an ornament, no problem. But they are solving a constructive problem also. No? And we get into the porch. we find here you could see the snow, no, over the Cooper shingles. No? There is all this is grass, no, but there is a square, no, in a, we can say in a Aldovanaic way, the circle, I think, make people meet, no? Then there is a circle, an empty circle in the middle of the school, and a full circle out of it. They are talking, no? Like they are talking, these two columns, like heavy columns, with the one in the center of the building, no? This is a game for the children, kind of different stones, one over the other, that seems to fall, no? A bit unstable, no? But they aren't, of course, no? But it's divided in three also, like the three parts of the classical column, but not in a classical way. Here you can see how it starts to change the color just because the water runs until here, then it drops, no? It's nice, no, to see these details. This is the porch from the entrance. This is not the model, of course. And then when you get in, we also decide to build this column in the center, divided in three. It has a basement, then a central part, and then a capital on top. No. This is it. Then you see how this circle has its own presence. No. Then you cannot see how this column ends until you go up. And you start to discover this skylight that can be considered as a patio in a sense. No? It's a place where people meet, no? Where students meet. And double spaces appear in different places. No? This is where the structure opens, holding this skylight. It's funny also to see how users appropriate architecture. These are the classrooms, the stair. There's some meeting rooms in between the two classrooms where you perceive the skylight, no, from here also, no. It's too late, but in another moment I can explain you the lamps. It was really funny how we convinced them to design and to build even the lamps. No? This is the gap I showed you before in the mall. No? I think that you are tired enough to hear me, and we will finish here. Thank you.
Much. It was very refreshing and very nice. I have a couple of questions, but I don't know if maybe we can open it to the room just in case people want to talk. Is there any questions? Oh, when I can ask. Okay, I think I very much enjoy many of the topics that you were covering today. I mean, the first one for me is sustainability, which is very much embedded in the way that you approach the site, and somehow this idea of using the resources or reusing the resources and repurposing them, and trying to think of sustainability as a kind of a smart way of managing resources, and trying to bring the creativity as something that is like, how can you work with the existing but also with off-the-shelf elements like things that are already there, but kind of incorporate them in a different way. So I was wondering, like, how much resistance did some of the clients have about using these resources in a different way? Because, you know, I'm sure everybody in the room enjoyed it, but I understand that resources on materials are very charged at some points, and they have a lot of connotations. So I just wonder if you have any kind of resistance from some of the clients at some points.
Sure. Yes. Sometimes it's not easy, no? But I don't know if you pay attention to the years that were written in the projects, no? But the project takes so long, no? There is a double approach, because we work normally for people that we don't know at all. Then we have to know them, we have to approach to them, and normally they don't know anything about architecture. Then they have to be open also to learn, or to learn together with us also, no? It's like when you start to build, you have to hear the builders, of course, because they know a lot of things that you don't have any idea. You don't learn, I don't know, there are a lot of things that you cannot learn, of course not in a school, but neither after. Then you need them, no? However, there is a point when they start to understand that perhaps they need you also. And together you become better, no? Then with clients, and also with builders, and also with everyone involved in the on-site, no? It's a question of education and to understand each other, no? And in this sense, you can start to work with these resources on the way that we feel comfortable, no? We feel comfortable to work with resources and to work with the things we have in our hands, not bringing things from I don't know where, because I think it doesn't make sense, no? But I think, everyone has to work in the way he feels comfortable. Of course, I don't have any opinion against anyone, no? However, we feel like comfortable with working with this, like common sense, what we have. And what can we do with the things we have? No? Sometimes changing, sometimes not, but it's because of one reason or another. No?
The other question is related to the context. Like every landscape or every piece of architecture that you created was in an amazing spot. Like the landscape was very beautiful, but at the same time, somehow you didn't need it because you ended up kind of creating a kind of an interior landscape. A very kind of many of the pieces that you were showing were very introvert. You were creating kind of a landscape within the space. So I just wonder how important you consider the landscape of the outside, or you just feel confident that we can create, oases you were mentioning at some point.
I think we all perceive landscapes every day, even if we are in a city. No, it's a built landscape. No, then when you place a new building in somewhere, you are, in a sense, building the landscape, no? We used to consider old fishermen villages as a very nice built landscape, no? But I think we have to keep on it, on this idea, no? Then there is the very natural landscape where nothing has been done or pretty nothing, but I think we are not in these amazing places, no? The first one I showed, it's a very nice photo, but it's a plot that has been cut, and the street was new. This slope that was there is because of an engineer that decided to do this in the street, no? Then it's not new. It's not an old space. You are acting on a place that someone has already acted, no? Then we try to work with a lot of respect on the landscape, but also we have to understand that we cannot disappear. We are building, no? But in some sense, architecture can be part of the landscape too, no? Can become part of it. No? And that's it. On the other hand, we consider the interiors as a very important part of the architecture. No? Sometimes, in fact, now we have two projects, starting projects, no, that we have done. In one, we have done 2 meetings with the clients, and the other 3. And the other day, I realized that we haven't drawn any facade, any volume, and the owners I haven't seen anything. They didn't ask. We are lucky until today, but it will come. It will come. I don't know, but it will come. No problem.
I can imagine there is a lot of kind of conversations to deliver this kind of interior space for personal space, domestic space. Okay, is there any question? Yes.
Thank you. Hi. This is work from a practice management point of view. So I see a lot of the, like you said before, a lot of the issues of design are resolved during construction, the material that you found that you use and how you resolve to use it and things like that. So at the very beginning, when you are about to get engaged by the client, do you, I guess, include in your package that, yes, you have to do all the project management so you can resolve all of those things? And do you find that clients sometimes just, I guess, want to have all that information up front? Or how do you manage, I guess, convincing them that it is key that you are not only part of the design, but part of the construction as well, so that you can get those results by addressing all those details on site?
Mm-hmm. Well, on one hand, I think the answer runs from the way every architect works in Spain. I think it's different from the way you work here, from a lot of specializations. No, an architect to build a house can do everything. We can calculate and structure, etc. No, but that's on one hand is this part of the answer. But on the other hand, we consider that a house it's not finished until the client. And after it, but until the client gets in the house, we can work with it. We don't have to do a project and then, okay, will be this, yes or yes. No, we can still talk with them. We can still discuss. They can have very nice ideas, like confronted with the project, and perhaps we agree with them, and perhaps not, but it's needed to keep on talking, no? Also with the builder, but also with the clients on site, no? Sometimes I don't like they come to the site because it's really tough, but it's better for architecture, I think. They are part of the process until the very end, because afterwards it's when architecture starts. When architects disappear, architecture starts. Then, if they do not know how the thing is done, how it has been done, which are the thoughts that move the project, they can destroy the house in 2 weeks, no? Because they take ownership of it, and that's one of the main points of it, no? They have to feel comfortable. They don't have to to answer what architecture needs. No, it's architecture who has to answer to their needs, and that there will be comfortable.
Thank you. So from the picture, I saw so many. You used the claim. It's a very simple and very untidy feeling when you show the room and the chair and the closet. So my question is, how do you use the simple clean like yellow color? Like how do you make uniqueness, or it seems very imperfect, but how do you really show your characteristics of your designs or thinking?
I think it's because we work with always with the same resources of the place. No, we don't bring things from abroad. Then all these colors, all these textures are from there. Then it seems that are kind of simple or unfinished or handmade, or because we work with the resources we have in our hands. No? In fact, Mallorca is there are a lot of still there are a lot of craftsmen working, no? And we can take benefit of it.
I don't know if you can answer this, but there's something about your work that seems to be, the poetry of it comes from a slowness. your way of beginning, the amount of time you spend. I'm just really curious how you, in this contemporary age where we're all working so fast and so hard to keep up with things, how you manage to carve out a practice that moves so slowly and you maintain these projects and evolve them over so much time.
It's a very important question because it's about economy, you know. Okay, we have been kind of lucky because we have had like projects like one and another and like going on, no? We have never been like surfing on the wave, but like a small project. But at the end of a project, we finish kind of in zero, no? We don't earn that much, no? And that's a problem, in fact. No? Sometimes we have, for example, this project in Switzerland that gives you a bit more, no? And then you can move, no? However, I think we don't. Well, once again, it's the way you feel comfortable with, no? We are not very, we'll say, like fast thinking or solving. Perhaps working in this way. Perhaps if I have to work in another way, perhaps I could be faster. But working in that way, it needs time. I cannot solve it in 2 weeks. Then sometimes it's also a question of psychology with the clients, no? Like, the meeting you promised for the last week, okay, it will be next week, okay? Then it's 2 weeks after, but it's because we need the time, no? And I think at the very end, okay, perhaps you finish the house 2 years later than the thoughts of the client, but it's nothing, 2 years at the end.
We're so young, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, if imagine that you spend, I don't know how many hundreds, thousands of euros in our case, no, and you are not convinced of that. It's a pity, no? If your trousers doesn't fit to you so well, 50 euros, nothing, no? But okay, I think it's a lot of money to think on what are you. Where are you putting your money? And you have to feel very comfortable with the project at the end. No? It's your house, no? The what? Well, in fact, Mallorca was called the Calm Island. And now it's not anymore, but we try to.
Could you say something about working in an insular context like Mallorca? I think a lot of the things that were alluded about the quality of the work, of being able to engage certain trades, of slowness, of all of these things might have to do with it, and maybe the relationship between being in an insular place like Mallorca, but being engaged academically across the Mediterranean, in Europe, building in other places, etc.
Mm-hmm. If I understood well, from Mallorca, what we learned, it's this lesson of the resources, let's say, no, like working with common sense, no. When you translate this approximation to the project to everywhere in the world, you will have different answer, but from the same concept, from the same thought, no? Then you can apply it wherever you are, wherever you work, no? Then in this sense, when we work in Switzerland, the context was completely different. Then normally with our clients in Mallorca building houses, we have problems of money, no? Normally I cannot talk about this in international lectures because the prices are very different, but okay, for example, my brother's house is less than 1,000 euros per square meter. Then that's a bit crazy to build in stone in Mallorca. It's a bit crazy. It has to be not double, but half more. No? Then we have to work very hard to get in those prices. In Switzerland, it seemed that we had a nice budget. It was a public school, in fact, but we had a nice budget, a comfortable budget. But the point is that the resources there were different. We moved to Switzerland, in fact, because of the problem of the crisis. We were doing like competition after competition in Spain, and one day we did a competition in Madrid, and we were 750 entries. And we decided not to do any more competitions in Spain at that moment. Then we moved to Switzerland because there are competitions every day or every 2 days, no? And it was because of this point of the crisis. But there, like visiting the country, and with some unconsciousness, in fact, no. But we, in a sense, we could say that we got in love with these farms, no. On the other hand, we say, okay, these farms are like this because they have these forests, no? And these forests can bring to the project a lot of elements, no? And working again with the local resources, we obtain kind of different buildings. I think the school in Switzerland cannot be in Mallorca. That's completely, it belongs to the place where it is, no? It's not the architect, it's the architecture that has to belong to its place.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.